What is up, gang? So, thank you for joining me. Um, so, earlier today, we introduced The Road, our next book, and we talked about some of its major themes and really honed in on this idea of how do we find hope in a book that is really bleak? And how do we find hope in life whenever life gets hard? And so, we really want to focus on that for this book and for this unit. But before we start diving into the actual book, tomorrow in class, I wanted to address something really quickly with you guys, and that is, as you can tell on the screen, dialogue in this book. It's done differently. McCarthy has a really distinct style, which you will catch on to very quick. But I wanted to key you guys into that before you start reading. So to kind of put it in his own words, his take on punctuation, McCarthy's, is, as you can see, there's no reason to blot the page up with weird little marks. He's not a fan of a lot of punctuation. And you can tell that in his writing. It's a lot of short sentences. It says he believes in periods, capitals, the occasional comma, but that's it. You might see one comma in an entire paragraph, and that's pretty standard for how he writes. No semicolons, no quotation marks, and very few colons. And he does all this, he says, to make it easier, not harder. And there are different takes. For some people, it is easier to read, and for other people, it does provide a challenge, just because it is very different from how we typically read, especially when it comes to dialogue, because, as I said, he doesn't use quotation marks, which is obviously how we delineate when speaking is happening in a text. So let's look at a couple of examples. So as you can see here down at the bottom, this is on page 5. So both examples very early from the book. Very minor spoilers, I promise. So as you can tell, he says, "They could be seen from the road now. It was day. The boy turned in the blankets. Then he opened his eyes. 'Hi, Papa,' he said. 'I'm right here.' 'I know.'" So as you can tell right away, he doesn't use quotation marks, obviously. He uses paragraph breaks. He goes line by line to delineate a change in speaker, and which that's typical for how we read dialogue now. We go line by line, but obviously there's the absence of that. And even you can tell it kind of winds in because of the use of, not because of the lack of quotation marks, it kind of sneaks in to the end of paragraphs a lot of times. So we're going to look at another example from pages 10 and 11. It's a little longer. And so you can see it starts up here. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes, of course. Are we going to die sometime? Not now. And we're still going south. Yes, so we'll be warm." You see how it's going, and it just goes. There's a little bit here where the boy speaks twice in a row, but otherwise, line by line, it's an alternating back and forth. And that can be difficult to keep up with, obviously, because not only does he not use quotation marks, he also, besides these speaker tags at the very beginning, doesn't use them anywhere else. So he doesn't remind us as the dialogue is going on who is speaking. And he can get away with that because, for the most part, there are two people in this book, the boy and the dad, the father. So if there's someone speaking, it's one of the two. And so it's just a matter of figuring out who spoke first, going back and forth. Now, if you're paying real close attention, and look in this earlier paragraph that I kept in, it says, "We brought the boy's book, but the boy is too tired for reading. Can we leave the lamp on until I'm asleep?" he said. "Yes, of course we can." And as you can tell, there's dialogue there, but he doesn't even bother, because it's just this short back and forth, just one line and one line. He doesn't even bother to use a paragraph break. So it's really important that you read closely and carefully and really organize things in your head. And so In class tomorrow, we're going to practice some strategies for how to keep things organized. But I want to introduce you to these strategies right now so you can just have them in mind and we can get the ball rolling a little quicker tomorrow. So this first strategy is called speak it out. Sorry, that T and out is blocked by my wonderful face. And in this strategy, you pair up with somebody else and you alternate reading line by line and really create the conversation, recreate the conversation, lift it from the page into real life to really create that back and forth. So, for example, on page 10, one person would say, "Can I ask you something?" And then somebody else would say, "Yes, of course. We're going to die sometime, not now." And you would create the back and forth of that conversation. And now the goal for that is to help you really get a feel for the back and forth conversational nature and get a rhythm for, the two different voices in your head. So eventually we can kind of scale back and not have to do a back and forth with two different people. But obviously, if any time while you're reading you need that, just ask me or one of your classmates. We'll be glad to help with that. Now, another strategy is to use markers, not markers that you color with, because we only have so many copies of the book and we can't have all of them marked up with different things. Although in a perfect world, maybe whatever works for you. So for this strategy, find two small items, say a pen or really anything. And you put one by one line, one speaker, and then the other by the other line. And as the dialogue goes, you shift these markers. And this is a visual reminder, visual aid to see who's speaking. And this works just to keep you up to date. So I'll use my mouse here. So let's go with, we'll put the mouse on where the man is speaking and then leave it blank for where the boy is speaking. Look at that. Blank, boy, mouse, man. What do you know? So can I ask you something? He said. Yes, of course. Are we going to die? Sometime, not now. Are we still going south? Yes. So will you warm? Yes. Okay. Okay, what? Nothing. Just okay. Go to sleep. Okay. Going to blow out the lamp. Is that okay? Yes, it's okay. And see, we keep that going to keep a visual reminder. And even if, you can tell he uses some really short dialogue. And so keeping that going can be cumbersome, obviously, just keeping line by line by line. And you might not want to do that and might end up leaving your markers behind. But one of the great things is, say we leave our mouse at at yes. We can say, okay, our mouse, if we lose track of I'm going to blow out the lamp, who said that? We can then mark, instead of going all the way back to the beginning and going through line by line from there to track who said it, you can start then from where you left your markers and just kind of accelerate the process and not have to completely go back and rework through things. And too far. And so this last strategy is to write it out. And that is to take the conversation and to write it as you would traditionally see it, with traditional grammar, using quotation marks, commas, speaker tags, the things that you would normally see in your more traditional books and your more traditional writing. And so again, go back to our example from page 10. So you would write something like, we keep that, can I ask you something, he said. You would say, yes, of course, the father responded. Are we going to die? The boy asked. Sometime, not now, the father reassured him. Using that, and not only to create an example, and really you get at the end, you get a piece of paper with the conversation on it. And so you can stick that in your book. And anytime you get back, rather than being bogged down or getting confused, you can read your transcription of it. That makes more sense to you. But also, kind of like whenever other teachers have you write flashcards or anything like that, just the act of writing something out can help you understand it better. So, yeah. So those are the 3 strategies we're going to work on for next time. And so for class tomorrow, there it is. I want you to come ready, to read. We'll eventually get to the start of the book, but also just discuss your thoughts on punctuation. Obviously, McCarthy has a very distinct view on what he values, and that is not a lot of punctuation. Do you think that punctuation is kind of overrated? Do you think, kind of like McCarthy, that things would just be easier if we stripped it back? Or do you see the value in these things? Do you think his writing would be easier to understand if he had quotation marks and things like that? And then obviously tomorrow, come prepared to practice these strategies and we'll get it knocked out. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow.